So last week, on Monday, I was a speaker at Cloud Native Security Con in Detroit, right before KubeCon. And I started that talk saying I have a confession to make, that it was going to be one of the most difficult talks that I have ever given, not because of the things that I was about to share, but because of the things that I had to keep to myself. See, 2 days after that talk, on Wednesday, I was going to be a keynote speaker on main stage at KubeCon, and that day, my team, my research team at Slim.AI, was going to publish this report that we had on top publicly available containers on Docker Hub in 2022. So I was going to reveal the insights at the main stage on KubeCon, which happened. It was really, really nice. But I told that crowd on Monday, I said, I wish this talk was a week later so that I can go into details and we can do a first principles type deep dive into the results and talk about the findings of that report. This talk, from my perspective, is that wish coming true, because now that that report is out, we can talk about the details. The only challenge that I have is that we have only 15 minutes, so we should better get to business and talk about those insights. But before we do so, I would like to see a show of hands. How many of you have heard about Docker Slim or Slim.AI before? Okay. So Docker Slim is our genesis, our DNA, our open source core. It's an open source container optimization tool. It has been on GitHub for quite some time, about 7 years right now. A lot of stars, over 15,000 stars, and teams across the globe have integrated it into their CI/CD workflows. Hundreds of thousands of developers use it right now. So with Slim.AI, we use this core technology, this strong foundation, and expand its efficiency, make it more secure, safer, easier to use for developers. So Slim.AI is our SaaS platform. And I'm not a DevOps engineer or a developer, I'm a data scientist. And working with Slim as a developer's, is a data scientist's dream coming true. The reason being that we have a lot of data in our systems. This year alone, we have scanned more than 1 million containers. So we do these like hundreds of thousands of scans regularly. And my research team takes these scans, deconstructs them, and we analyze them in an effort to understand what makes these containers developer-friendly and production-ready. How many of you use containers on a regular basis? Oh, wow. 80% of the room. Brilliant. One more question. Did your company ever use publicly available containers? Wow, that's less than 50%. We asked this question in a global randomized survey we designed, asking questions to developers and DevOps engineers, and 66% of the companies said they use publicly available containers. Only 19% said they have developed all of their containers in-house. So what I would like to do, as I said, we scan all these containers and I work with this data on a regular basis. What I would like to do is I would like to provide you a window into the world of containers as developers experience it, often for the first time. I would like us to expand our senses about this world by looking into some perspective-shifting statistics. So take, for example, the 60%. That's the percentage of top publicly available containers that have more vulnerabilities in them today than they did a year ago. The rest of the containers haven't improved that much, and we will be talking about the rest of the containers in a bit. But remember that this is after a year of intense focus on software supply chain security in the aftermath of multiple security incidents. We talk about 2022 as the year of software supply chain security. So before diving any deeper, let's couple this insight with this other statistic that I have here. 70% of the developers said in that randomized global survey that I mentioned that we designed, that their customers are demanding that their containers have 0 vulnerabilities. On top of that, 88% said it has become more challenging to remove those vulnerabilities from their containers. The number one contributing factor being the complexity in these containers, the numerous components with multiple dependencies. So before going any deeper, as you can see, just by 3 numbers into the presentation, there is a story unfolding in front of our eyes. Containers are becoming more vulnerable. Customers are demanding perfection more than ever. And developers are feeling the pressure. And although developers are in the heat of the battle, feeling the pressure, there's an undeniable rising tide when it comes to developer interest in containers, Kubernetes, and companies adopting containers, like large and small. Right, this graph is from the 2022 developer survey by Stack Overflow. What we are seeing here is that developers say Docker is the number one technology they love and want to learn, closely followed by Kubernetes. And we see that in usage statistics as well. Docker's all-time pulls have increased, tripled in just a year. And although there are lots of tutorials out there for the basics, building and shipping containers, there is precious little understanding around what's in these containers, right? Like atomic units, these little building blocks of larger organisms, we see them as somewhat trivial. Requests go in, data comes out, it's just that simple. But then, last year, something like Log4Shell happened, and all of a sudden, we have become a lot more invested in understanding what's in our software systems, the principal components, the containers, as well as the second-order effects, their dependency trees. So how did this renewed sense of awareness change the container landscape in terms of complexity and risk vulnerabilities? So last year, around this time, we have put a magnifying lens on the top publicly available containers and published a report with analytical insights. I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll say this. As container enthusiasts, experts, we were expecting to see some outliers in the data. But even the averages were surprisingly high. And maybe a little parenthesis here. These top publicly available containers, the top 165 of them, they account for more than 30% of all pool volume on Docker Hub. And the total volume is 318 billion. This cluster accounts for more than 104 billion of it. So these containers are the most common starting points for a lot of developers around the globe. So last week, as I said, we published a sequel to the 2021 report. And this time we are focusing on the delta between 2021 and 2022. So let's go ahead and look into the data and the key findings. So the first one here is about vulnerabilities. we saw more high and critical vulnerabilities than ever across all categories. I already mentioned that 60% of the containers that we looked at have more vulnerabilities in them than they did a year ago. And it is true that we are remediating, but we are detecting new incidents 4 times faster than our remediation rate. And most notably, the things that we are remediating are mostly low and negligible vulnerabilities. The new ones that are being added to the cluster are mostly high and critical incidents. The number of critical high vulnerabilities have increased by 50% last year for these containers. So today, the average container has almost 300 vulnerabilities, 30% of which belongs to a high or critical category, up from 20% last year. And we thought 20% was too high. So let's move on. But maybe before moving on, I brought a couple examples because we're looking at this like high-level picture. But I brought some examples from the programming languages cluster in the containers that we are looking at. So I brought Golang, Node, Python, Node, before and after. As you can see, the only container that has improved, the latest version has improved, is Node here. But when you dive deeper into that superficial, high-level vulnerability counts, even for Node, I don't know if you can see the details, but the number of critical incidents, the high vulnerabilities, have increased significantly, doubled in terms of percentages. So let's move on to the next category of findings. This is about the complexity. Okay, the component complexity of these containers have also increased significantly. Today, the average container has almost 400 packages. If you think about it, that number is supposed to be the tip of the iceberg. Every package might have hundreds, thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dependencies, as shown by multiple academic studies. There was this one study from Darmstadt University back in 2019. They looked into the NPM ecosystem alone, and they said the top packages in that ecosystem has 130,000 dependencies plus each. But it turns out that, so the tip of the iceberg is an iceberg in and of itself, but it's not just the packages that increased. The licenses have increased by 2.5x. Containers have more layers. It takes longer to scan them. Even the metadata, their SBOMs have increased by 40%. And don't get me wrong, these packages, these tooling, is necessary for experimentation, testing, debugging. It makes it more fun for developers to work with these containers, but they also represent attack surface and implies the need for an automated process to remove it so that it never makes it to production. There's a lot more to unbox there, but unpack there, but we have only 15 minutes, so I'm kind of rushing through these findings, but please ping me or pull me in if you have more questions. So let's move on to survey results. Because data is data, but what's the impact on our people? How do developers and DevOps engineers deal with this more complex and vulnerable landscape? So an overwhelming majority of the developers said they want to learn more about containers, 92%. I mentioned that 88% find removing vulnerabilities from their containers more and more challenging over time. In fact, only 1 in 4 developers said they fully understand, and this is not execution, this is understanding. They fully understand how container slimming and hardening works. And interestingly, there seems to be a disconnect between the executives and the frontline workers. So 49% of the executives said they slim and harden containers in their companies. But the people who do the actual work report significantly lower numbers. So companies and governments may demand a world with zero vulnerabilities, but that land feels out of reach given our current status, the current tools and techniques. And to me, the bottom line is that we are no more secure today than we were back in 2021. The silver lining, however, is that we have woken up. We are more aware of these challenges than ever before. As you can see, the container landscape that we looked at offers a lot of opportunities to scale for developers, but it also presents multiple risks. For us at Slim, we think you should know what's inside your containers and ship only what's needed to production. We believe in intelligent optimization through automated processes. And I know that there are many other teams with different approaches, teams who are relentless, brilliant, competent, losing sleep, thinking about these problems. That's why I think the future is bright, the awareness, the fact that we are no longer ignorant about these things. But as you can see, it's not improving as fast as we would like it to be. So hopefully next year, if I have the stage, I would love to bring the 2023 report and talk to you about how the vulnerability and complexity landscape changed over time. And I know that the future is bright and we will have better news then, but today has been a little bit of a concerning and grim story. Again, I'm optimistic, but this year the delta that we have seen is not that great. So thank you so much for your time. Ping me, connect, whatever is convenient, more comfortable to you on Twitter, LinkedIn. We have a Discord channel, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you.